Here we are in week 23 and we're going to look at risk assessments and safe working. The two risk assessment questions here come from the Health and Safety Unit 8, 2.1. And look, these two are both in blue. They are practical demonstrate questions. Give examples of potential risks and hazards in a learning environment or off-site activity. And Health and Safety 3.3, give examples of ways to support children to assess and manage risk. And Safeguarding 3.4, explain how support staff can take steps to protect themselves within their everyday practice in the learning environment and during off-site activities. So we're going to look at the first two blue demonstrate questions first. Here is the worksheet that you're going to need for this one. This worksheet has all the demonstrate criteria. There are only two for Unit 8, Health and Safety. Let's have a look at the worksheet. Okay, it looks like this, 2 pages. First page is for Health and Safety 2.1. Second page is for 2.1 and 3.3 together. So it's saying here you can choose an off-site activity or an activity in the learning environment, and you start by describing the activity. So you could say playtime or a PE lesson or a maths activity in the classroom, and then you can say, if you haven't already, where is it, which school are you in, and where in the school are you, your name and the date. And then in order to write a risk assessment, you just need 3 columns. In the first column, you write a list of hazards. In the second column, you've got to do the assessment. How likely are the children to come into contact with the particular hazard? And if they did, how severe could their injury be? And in the third column, you make modifications. You can put up barriers, remove the object, substitute the object for something else, or supervise the children. So let's have a look at one column across here and see how you would fill in the risk assessment. So I've done the first one for you, slips and trips, especially on wet ground. And then for this column here, you need this little grid. Let's have a look and expand it. So that you're doing a multiplication sum, you're multiplying how likely the children are to come into contact with this hazard. Is it remote, likely or frequent? And if they do come into contact with it, how minor, moderate or major could their injury be? So we're looking at slips and trips on wet ground. I think the likelihood they will slip or trip on wet ground is frequent. Even not on wet ground, children slip and trip all the time. So I'm putting frequent. But I'm saying that even if they do slip on a bit of wet ground, their injury is only going to be minor. I mean, you could start thinking, well, they could slip over and crack their head open and have to go to hospital and eventually they might die. But let's just be sensible about this. If a child slips on wet ground, they're probably going to bump themselves or scratch their knee. So I'm putting frequent times minor, so frequent times minor, and that gives me the risk assessment of medium. So I've written medium here. That's all you have to write. Remote times major, and that would come out as high. Actually, no, remote times major comes out as a medium risk. Okay, let's put that little grid back again. And then you need to say, what are you going to do about it? So you've got 4 choices. Wet ground, you can't really put a barrier, although sometimes schools do. They might say the grass is too wet today, you're not allowed on the grass. So there's a barrier around the grass. You can't really remove the whole grass from the playground. That's not practical. You can't really substitute it for anything else, but you could allow the children on the wet grass if you supervise them and you make sure they're wearing sensible footwear. I've got a whole set here of other hazards that I could imagine in a school playground, and you can do this activity even if you are not in school at the moment and you've never been on a school trip. You could still do 2.1 because what you're thinking of are the potential risks. So you need to imagine a classroom that you've been in or a playground that you've been in and think, what are all the possible potential hazards? I thought of a few here: the climbing frame, broken equipment, maybe broken trike, bins having wasps and the bins being too full, wet, muddy grass. The walls and the benches are just a hazard to the children. There could be a gate that's open or a gap in the fence. Sometimes the playground is not properly separated from parked or moving cars. They could be a hazard. Oh, and here's a nice one: cat poo in the playground. So then you decide, how likely are they to come into contact with any of these? And if they did, how serious would it be? And you calculate you assess the risk. And then you need to say in this column, what are you going to do about it? Barrier, remove, substitute, or supervise the children. So this first page you can fill out. It's your choice. It could be on a trip, it could be forest school, or it could be in the school, in a school playground, during a maths activity in the classroom. Let's have a look at the second half of this worksheet now. This one here is about, you can put in some risks and hazards here as you go through the activity, but this is really about supporting the children to assess and manage risk for themselves. I've put an example in here. It came from a student from last year. You can read it. You obviously can't use theirs, but you can read it, then delete it and put in your own evidence. This will give you the sort of idea of what you've got to put in here. It can't be you telling the children what to do. It has to be about you asking the children questions and them telling you their answers. Okay, let's go back to Moodle. So that's the risk assessment worksheet. If you fill out both pages of it, you've got 2.1 and 3.3. Maybe at the moment you can't do the one with the children because you haven't been on a trip yet and you haven't been in the playground with them. But as I think you probably could, if you were creative, talk about questions you've asked the children, even in a classroom. Why is this dangerous? Why shouldn't you rock on your chair? We're always saying that. Here's a classroom checklist from the Health and Safety Executive website. That would give you some ideas for what to put in your worksheet if you chose to do a classroom. And again, from the HSE, Health and Safety Executive website, lots more information on how to do risk assessments that you might find helpful. If you have already been on a school trip, you could have a look in this document. It gives you ideas for how to write a detailed diary entry and see how many different criteria from all the different units you could tick off. You could tick off communication criteria, behaviour management criteria, see what you could fit into your school trip, maybe even some maths and some English. The second question for this week on safe working, I've done a separate video to explain this one. So when you get down here, this is an essay, worksheet type question. There's a video already to help you with this one. So you've got two pieces of work. Can you do a risk assessment and write a small diary entry about supporting the children? And then your essay. Send those two pieces of work to me and I will mark them for you.